this evening. He is an architect, a naval architect, and certainly maybe a naval architect before he became an architect. A planner, an educator, a traveler, and a consultant to numerous organizations across the United States. He's from Illinois. He attended the University of Illinois, where he received his bachelor's degree with highest honors. He later went on to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he received his master's degree, gained considerable experience in teaching even prior to the war at Oklahoma A&M, or Oklahoma State now. He then was in the service, the U.S. Navy Reserve, from 1942 to 1946, came back to Illinois, was appointed to the faculty, the Department of Architecture, immediately after the war, and very quickly rose to the rank of full professor by 1951. He was also a design consultant and chief designer to the architectural firm of Lundin and Hilfinger in Bloomington, Illinois, a firm that won numerous awards thanks to our speaker's contribution. He designed the education building at the University of Illinois, for which he was given national recognition, and continued to teach the graduate courses, studio, at the University of Illinois until he retired and became professor emeritus in 1970. In 1971, or the following year, he was named a fellow in the American Institute of Architects, and since then, besides acting as a consultant to numerous organizations, teaching at the University of Illinois, several programs in schools on the West Coast, he began to write a book titled The Urban Stage. And the first phase of his series of lectures today, this afternoon, is The Glass of Fashion. A. Richard Williams.
Try this this gadget. Can you hear me up there? All the way at the back? Okay. It's a delight to be here after many years. Since I first visited Ball State before the school existed, and to find it all a reality now is just great. I think the best thing of all, though, is to find Dave Hermanson here and others of the faculty I've gotten to know. One thing that Dave didn't mention is the best part of architectural education, if you stay with it long enough, or in practice too for that matter, is the marvelous friends you make that stay with you all your life. And that is the greatest treasure of all. Now, I have a very rich life indeed. While I'm not at home, I may be traveling at various schools of architecture where former students are teaching or visiting offices where they're practicing. And this is maybe something that doesn't show in these slides, but I wanted to make sure that I mention it here because it's so much a part of this great thing that we're into. I don't know how elaborate I can state this, but you probably have heard it till you really wonder whether your faculty are in their right minds or not, to tell you that architecture is the greatest thing anybody can possibly do. I testify to that. I mean, if one of your senior citizens present testifying that you have chosen very, very well. And I want to try to prove that in a certain way with this presentation this afternoon and tonight. It's perhaps maybe an attempt to enlarge the definition. I won't try to do that now. I'd rather try to go through a series of thoughts, and some of them have, of course, have become buildings, some of them become other things like boats, or ideas that are put down in a manuscript form, such as this draft of the book I have with me. But they all are some facet of this marvelous world of architecture, which I feel so fortunate to be a part of. When Dean Sappenfield first called me to see if I could come over, I said, well, if you can make it before, not before the middle of October, it'd be fine, because I'm in the throes of trying to shake down a new motor sailor that is not quite finished, but is in the water, was in the water, and I'll be putting it away. So that may take a little more time. So I hope to make it by your deadline while I'm here. And he asked me if I could show some slides of my house in Champaign, and which I have in this set, and a few other things that may be related to it. But I thought first I would try to set the underlying direction that I feel is important, and as it has affected me and perhaps other architects as well, and as it may point to one of several directions for us in the present and immediate future, in a time when I think we do feel a very especially urgent need for direction. Not just one direction, but one of perhaps several. I've felt, because maybe my parents were very active in the theater, and I kind of grew up in a family of one-liners at the dining table, and a sense of appreciation of setting and so on. I was kind of take it for granted that later on in practice of architecture, and certainly in education, I felt very much as if I were a set designer. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and so when in the last few years, I thought, well, this is getting to be a pretty strong influence, and I'm putting a book together with the help of the Graham Foundation, a grant from them, that why not use that title as a metaphor? I mean, if you follow Shakespeare's thought in As You Like It, that all the world's a stage and all the men and women players, you don't really have to believe that. You don't have to say it's really true. And that's what I'm not trying to say it's really true in presenting this series of ideas. It's something to think about, and I want to try to relate it to the process of architectural design and how it is enriched, I believe, by using this kind of metaphor or analogy for the work we do. Following through then of the title, The Urban Stage, which of course tries to describe the larger setting in which we all communicate and socialize and work, down to the finest small scale setting, we have a spectrum of design in which the use of the dramatic analogy or the dramatic metaphor is very relevant. So to follow through, if you imagine, I didn't bring all my slides that I wanted to. And one that I'd sometimes start with, you'll have to imagine it now. I asked if maybe we had it here in the slide collection, but they're being cataloged, so we can't show it. But if you imagine on this screen, if it were up there, the castle of Elsinore in Denmark, which was Hamlet's castle, the setting for the play Hamlet, one of Shakespeare's great plays, as you know. And then if you could imagine the setting and the dialogue and so on, if you know the play, you may remember that Hamlet, in order to, he thinks that his uncle, the king, had killed his father, and so he sets up a plot to bring this out. And in order to loosen everybody up, he feels he has to pretend that he's insane. And so well in the play, he starts doing that, and a terrible thing to do, but his sweetheart, Ophelia, he feels he must convince her that he has gone mad. And so when he leaves the stage after this scene, she has her soliloquy in which she says, of course she is absolutely shocked, and she says, "Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. The glass of fashion, the mold of form, the absurd of all observers, quite down." If you're a Shakespeare fan, you may remember that line very well. Well, I thought those three phrases, the glass of fashion, the mold of form, the absurd of all observers, you see chapter titles on the right-hand screen, would be maybe suitable as a way to look at architecture and urban design. I was trying to figure out why Shakespeare would, in using those three phrases to describe Hamlet's nobility of character, at least as Ophelia saw him, the extent to which those noble qualities would be a personification of the qualities of architecture. Why did he choose to make the glass of fashion first? We generally think of attributes of fashion as something after, that is observed after a form is made. And so I asked some of my literary friends in the English department if there was any significance to that, and they said probably no. I hate to let you down, but probably it's just because it was more poetic that way. But I still pursue it because I wanted to try to make a point, and that's what I want to try to see what you think about it. Surely, if this is an important attribute of a character of a man or a character of a building, then there must be something more substantial to it than meets the eye at first glance. So we'll try to go into that. And tonight, I thought this afternoon I would look at some work, among them my house and boats and things, and try to illuminate this question of what is more substantial about the understanding of fashion. And then tonight I would go on to other parts of this set of ideas. The mold of form, I think you can appreciate. That's really kind of the gut center of this manuscript. It's not exactly how to do it, how to design, but I'll go into that a little bit. It's how architectural form may be molded. The absurd of all observers is an essay on criticism. That is afterthought. After you make something, what do you think of it? Not only what do other people think of it, how does it survive, but how does it relate to self-criticism as a personal growth facet? The Signs of Takamatsu is a prose poem which I think I might end up with tonight at the very end, because I won't tell you any more about that. But Takamatsu is a fascinating Japanese city on the inland sea, and its reflections in the water at night, it's the reflection of its signs, mostly vertical. It's something that really enchanted me, and I thought that was symbolic also of, say, the whole city as theater, and we'll go into that a little bit. The Artist of Environment is another essay that maybe doesn't relate so much to the theme of the urban stage, but it raises the question, I think this is prominent in our minds today, made more prominent because of our increasing environmental awareness, that if environmental science, if pollution abatement, if all the problems of resource balance, ecological balance, and so on, are problems to which scientists and engineers relate, at what point do we if we reach normalcy, if we suppose we bring pollution and so on, all the questions of environmental ethics into balance, what then? To whom do we turn for enhancement of the environment? Surely there is a new opportunity for us as architects to consider the wider scope of our relationship to our environment. Not to be egotistical about it, to say that once things are in better balance or back to normal, that society has to have us to enhance the state of normalcy, to make things even more magnificent in relation to nature. But I think it would open up a new dimension in which our various design disciplines come closer together than ever. If there's a science of environment, surely there's an art of environment. And that's, if we always thought of architecture as the art and science of building and things to which it relates, I think we can ask the same thing: what is the art of environmental design, as well as what is the science of it? So that is an essay of that. I'm just giving you a capsule of each of these parts now, because I may refer to them as these slides come through. The final chapter, taken from the French phrase cadre de vie, which means life setting, comes back again to the dramatic analogy, because that word, it's an idiom, really infers a much more positive sense of ensemble of the settings that we inhabit. I think the slides will definitely show that a little bit more. The inference as a concluding chapter is that it becomes much more important, if it's more important for us to understand the ensemble, the totalness of a setting, its landscape, its furnishings, its sonic, thermal, acoustical, its olfactory environment, as well as the visual, then what does that mean to public education? At lunch today, we were talking about the quality of our work. The best work we do as architects, almost inevitably, is done with the best clients. I'll have a little bit to say about that tonight too. But if it's true that the best work we do is for the best clients, that means doesn't mean the most money or the most power or prestige, but I think it means the most sensitivity. The best clients I've had always were those who were the most responsive, sensitive to their own environment, and usually very fine performers in whatever they were doing. Again, to use the analogy of the theater, they were excellent actors, but sincere actors. So the inference there at the end is, if we want to expand the influence of our work and what it can mean to the wider circles of all of society, surely we must involve ourselves politically and every other way in the education, in public education, primary education, and so on, to enhance the qualities all children and as they grow up have in making better choices, understanding their life setting, their cadre de vie. So I went into that a little more than I intended, but I think I have to beg your forgiveness in presenting so many ideas in such rapid succession. I know it's asking a lot, but I do it because I feel confident that they're important, and that there may be something that will be communicable once we get through some of the slides. I wanted to start by looking at the phenomenon of fashion as we kind of understand it today. We see it cyclical. as architects, we're very susceptible to current influences. I don't want you to try to read all the words on that diagram, the interaction of the Korab influence and all that. But if you want to take time eventually to do that, fine. But it's simply a way to present with time as an axis, always reading from left to right. On all the diagrams that I'll show you where there's that timeline, we move from left to right in a sequence. But that's all that attempts to show, is the cyclic nature of fashion. So I'm trying to understand what is more fundamental about it. When Shakespeare used the phrase glass of fashion, he meant reflection, that Hamlet was a reflection of the best of fashion. Not looking glass so much, but that, you know, you can take that on yourself. I mean, hold up a mirror. What do you see? And there's some interesting permutations that I want to get into there. But Jerry Exline's drawing on the left is, I think, also kind of aware of what it might mean on the street. The way we walk, we're aware of where we are in time and place, and our clothes, everything that we encounter as part of the public and private stage set is kind of susceptible to this. But I wanted to try to find something a little more, not to be critical of fashions and architecture. Here are just two examples. You know, we know many, many, many more. All the way from fashion that is perceived by a large group, say the classical great golden age of Greece and Rome and so on, the Palladian influence and many others. The work of Gaudi and James Stirling probably are episodes. I just want to point out that they reflect a kind of high sense of personal fashion, sometimes fast changing, sometimes slow changing. But I think we're already familiar with that as maybe all too familiar. I want to try to get behind that further and examine what I believe is a very important principle. Try to stay with this a minute. It's maybe a little far out, but some of our sociologists and behavioral scientists are also been using for some time, from Max Weber on, this notion of understanding behavior in terms of its dramatistic analogy, a performance. All the acts in human life, activity patterns, daily, seasonally, and so on, may be thought of as performances. And they vary in many ways. If you look at the top of the left-hand diagram, there's an attempt to show, to portray a combination of a setting. That's that kind of, it's not meant to be a cross-section of a dome, it's just to be an indication of a setting, of an enclosure. And within that setting are assembled properties, or functioning gear, equipment. We're all familiar with that. Imagine that as a kitchen, perhaps, or as the area around a cocktail table, around a coffee table. Now, within that setting, a performance will take place, or many performances. And that line, the wiggly one going through, is attempt to portray that. Now, my thesis is that the quality of the setting and the quality of performance within the setting are inseparable if true understanding of fashion and style is to be had. That we artificially take, when we examine maybe works of architecture or painting or anything else, we take the equivalent of just the setting alone. We don't think about the quality of the function so directly. We say form must follow function. Or as Philip Johnson said the other night on Dick Cavett's show, that form really follows form. You know, he likes to be a little bit flippant, but anyway, there is, what I'm trying to suggest here is that the true depth of understanding of fashion depends on understanding the performance quality as well as the setting quality. The rest of the diagram just simply shows the various kinds of performances that take place. Tonight I'm going to use two examples which I think portray it very well: the Japanese tea ceremony and Holy Communion. Happens to be Holy Communion at Corbusier's chapel at Ronchamp that I participated in once. And regarding them, those examples as such inseparable relationship of performance and setting. And we'll see how that may go on to other uses. You have various kinds of performances. I wasn't trying to catalog them all, but to recognize that somewhere there is a peak or a place where, in this room, for instance, I think this is a great room for a presentation like this. The quality of it has a lot to do, helps the quality of the performance. I think we're all aware of that. It's an architectural thing, but what we may be not so aware of is that that is so much related to time, and that may be at times when it is much more sensitive than others. One example, since I'm a boat freak, I think you know recently the America's Cup Regatta was held, and the two sailboats of Australia, Miss Australia and Courageous, raced. Now, there's such a close wedding of performance and setting being the sailboat and its gear and all that, so close and so tied together, it's hard to separate them. That there are peaks, there are crucial points where that relationship is really strongest. That may be a little hard to show, but as the slides go forward, I think maybe we can try to show it. Parts of that interrelationship rely on a wider sense of sensory perception than we as architects generally allow ourselves. We've become I think we've tended to become more purely visual, functional performers in our profession. We're not so perhaps aware of the positive values of sound, of smell, of tactile, thermal design as they relate to our work. I want to point out a few things there. I think that if you analyze that interrelationship of performance and setting, you will find that you soon exhaust the purely visual. You become much more interested in how do you tune the sound in a building? It's not just providing acoustical isolation or absorption. You want the sound, the quality of it, to be in tune with everything else. Right now I'm in the process, I designed the remodeling, renovation of a Catholic church in Urbana, a Victorian Gothic church. I don't have slides of it. We're very, I hope, respectful of what's there. But we're using this principle of paying a lot more attention to how we tune the sound and how we tune the tactile responses when you come in, the thermal and the narthex, how it feels as a more positive thing. And I'm sorry I'm talking about this instead of slides. Maybe next year I'll have some slides of that. But that diagram on the right simply is an attempt to show the dimension of the sensory realm. And we ask ourselves, to what extent do we relate to that as designers? We certainly don't relate to all of it, but we certainly should be aware of what way we can use media to reinforce those phenomena that may be present in every setting. I'm kind of doing a little bit of this theory first in diagrammatic form, but there won't be many diagrams from now on. It'll be mostly pictures. which range all over the place. But I want them to somehow symbolize some of the points I've been making. A good many of these are from Upper Michigan, where I've been fortunate to go part of every summer. The natural setting on the right is a new historic marker that we helped put in place. I designed the arches, and one of the local men who was a Finnish extraction made the fence to my design. And it's the original settlers on the island. On the left is the look of the St. Mary's River, which is the connection between Lake Huron and Lake Superior. Larry Perkins of Perkins and Wills, schooner Allegro is tied up at the dock. And several of other of my boats are clustered there. I'm going to have to show you a few of those because I believe design is a fairly wide spectrum, and as a hobby, boat building and operating is I think separate yet becomes very intertwined, and I can't resist showing you some of those examples. Here's a kind of curiosity. On the shore, I built an 8-foot cube called Cube 8. It's exactly 8 feet on every side, because bringing materials on this island, you think, I don't want to have to make another trip, and so you put a bunch of plywood sheets on the top of your car, and you want to use them to the maximum. So there's very little waste in this cube. The big dock has served as a kind of a stage. Boats come in, friends come by boat, and we gather. There's a shore path going along there. It's a setting for cocktail parties and so on. And I use the cube as a stateroom and a storage place in the winter and so on. It took 30 days to build, from design to finished till we christened it. You see the 8 opens, and you look in. It's a kind of a stateroom, as I said. It also kids the ships that pass by. They think it's a navigational thing. There may be a radar trap or something in there. Because the red and black is the color scheme of the channel markers, the ships that pass the St. Lawrence Seaway. Well, I thought I'd start with the smaller things and then work up to larger things, and maybe try to indicate some of the principles I mentioned first from the diagrams. Here is a model study of my house in Champaign on the right. First attempt to see what a courthouse might be, and then the plan as it is today on the left, plan and section. Some of you may have seen this published in PA. It's been in several other magazines. But the idea here was those marks are part of a symbolism. I didn't show the key here, but the F means a front stage area. I was, at the time I did this about 20 years ago, pretty conscious of the fact that that platform, as you'll see in the slides, is a stage. It's raised. And I try to handle the lighting and the views and so on in a kind of theatrical way. And if you look at the plan, I don't know whether I can point this out or not. If this light doesn't, yeah. You see this squarish element is a concrete exposed aggregate pad which comes from inside. The glass line is along here, and this teakwood platform is here. So you're seated in this area. There can be a performance going on out here. Morris Udall, when he was a candidate, came and visited Champaign. We had a party for him here, and it was great as a setting for a political gathering of that kind. And you could also think of this as a runway for a Miss America contest, or it's never quite come up to that burlesque level, but that is, I think you'll see that in the slides. But it's a brick-walled enclosure, street. It's a very fairly busy street, so I felt the need for a somewhat isolated, and there's no view. It's a typical flat townscape, so the idea was to try to make a view by a courtyard. And this, of course, you're familiar with that idea. The model was kind of the setup for that. You don't see it, but the glass line is, well, it's right there. This is the enclosed portion. There's an entrance from the main street, University Avenue, at the north side, and you come up with a very thick wall with a very thin door. And you squeeze through that, and the idea is the space explodes and all that jazz, you know. But it really does have somewhat of a dramatic impact. The lighting is a combination of full-width glass, floor-to-ceiling along the south side, and then a skylight strip along the top of this wall, which you see in the section up on the side. See it? Then the second floor has a studio with a sloping glass wall. You'll see that in a minute. Here are two interiors, different seasons, but you're in the living area looking out toward the courtyard. You see this platform, this conversational area is here, and then the dining area is along at a slightly lower level. Gravel covers the courtyard. Then at the left is a sleeping area. We'll see that in a minute. You see that maybe a little more clearly in this autumn setting with this runway or this raised exposed aggregate slab going out and around, dining area, vines going up the walls. This change in the fence, the enclosure, the brick walls come out here, 10 feet high, surrounded by trees on all sides. They're bigger now. Here's a storage area with a black stained louver front, and then these panels are stucco, and I sometimes use those for projection. Then because of the ordinance requiring a backyard, I had to stop this wall here and then change it. But they did permit a fence. So here is design imposed by zoning regulation. But I kind of liked it because as you look out from the platform area, it does give a sense of direction. You're looking toward something different than running the wall all around. I'll show you another house I designed in which the wall does go all around, similar, and we can compare them maybe. Some other features you may not see so clearly, but the structural system is steel frame, very thin mullions, trying to make that glass wall disappear, in fact. And in the Wurzler house, which I'll show you, we did get to the point where we have no mullions at all, and this relationship becomes purely butted glass pieces. The ceiling is white plaster, dropped down so that you see the mullions go up beyond it, about 2 feet beyond, and everywhere that ceiling plane is kind of held away from the walls and from the skylight on the other side. I think, I don't know whether that'll show in this next group or not. Well, you see from the courtyard looking back, here's a slide doesn't show the interior very well, but you see that strip of light is from the skylight along the north wall. The upper story was put on 6 years ago and didn't show in this slide, but it looks about the same now. This is a side view from the side street. You see the wall and where it changes to the redwood stained black fence, louvered fence, and then the studio is simply a triangle. I think that may show on the next two. Here you see from the street side the wall and the very narrow door with the skylight lighting the lower story is right along the top of this, and then 2.5 feet back this faces north. The studio windows slope back, and you see this black stained redwood forms the enclosure of that. Now, I'm sorry I don't have more slides of that studio area. This is the interior of this sloping glass area. you see the mullions coming down, and then on the horizontal surface inside, just inside the base of those mullions, that glass wall, is a series of flat storage chests with mirror tops. And the mirrors are the size of each module of the glass mullion, so with a void space between. That's what that interruption indicates there. The brick, you can see this is the materials. I'll comment a little bit about that. The Chicago Common brick, which unfortunately is unavailable anymore. The kilns have worn out or something, but I'm doing a house now in Champaign, a very large one, and we tried very hard to get it, but we couldn't. But it's very rich, and it's soft, and it tends to fall apart eventually, but it does absorb moisture and dirt, patina and ivy growing there. It gives it that character. I spoke a little bit of the, maybe I can back up to the interiors a little bit, yeah. Of the other senses that are involved and how they can become positive. One thing about a large space, I think you're aware of this, is that you have a greater dynamic feeling of sound. And I think you can tune that by the amount of absorbent area you have. And I have a 7-foot Baldwin Grand, which I haven't shown you yet. That's a couple more slides. And the sound is just great. I mean, it has just enough resonance. The teak floor is full. Teak as a wood, is full of paraffin, of its own kind of paraffin. I don't know what it is chemically. But it's always aromatic. It's always giving off a little bit of fragrance. And that combined with the dust that's in the gravel, there are gravel areas inside the house and the vines growing inside the house. There's a particular aromatic quality when you open the door. It's just the result of those materials. And I think also the sense of thermal comfort, you get greater comfort by being away from glass walls. One advantage of a lot of space is that you can make isolated groupings of furniture away from the sense of cold radiation to glass and so on. So it was a number of those things. This, of course, faces south. My light's going out. I can't. I'll have to describe. Oh, there it is. This faces south, this glass wall. So, and all the trees around that courtyard and in it protect that glass wall in summer. This is passive solar design, I'm told. Now that was, of course, it was 20 years ago when it was designed, and we didn't have that word passive active solar design, but it faces south so that in the summer the trees shade it and tend to keep it cool. In the winter the leaves are down, the sun is lower, and it does take over part of the heating load. I don't know how much, maybe 20% on a good day. So that's one of the other advantages of that. I'm trying to say that maybe not at a full level of perception, but there was a gradual understanding that there are other senses involved than just the visual. And this, of course, the main thing I was interested in was the dramatic. Well, there is an influence. I don't know whether you can tell it or not, but a lot of visitors, when they come in, step up on this teak platform. And there's a lot of, it's about 45 feet long, that room, and 35 feet wide. And of course, the glass wall seems to extend it beyond. The effect of all that is to, time and time again, I find visitors will come in and start kind of a dance around. They'll start going around. If you noticed in the plan, maybe I can go back to that a minute. Yeah. You see the core element, which has the bathroom and kitchen. That's an island. It's black in the model, and there's that one part that shows in the plan is fairly intricate. Dean Allen Weller, who was a retired dean of fine applied arts at Illinois, first time he came out, He had a drink in his hand, you know, we're having a cocktail party or something. And he just kept orbiting around that core, and his eyes were going like this. And it's just been an influence. I just want to tell you that sometimes a space like this will tend to directly influence people's behavior that way. I'm sure you've seen this happening. An example of that, maybe I can explain it in connection with the College of Education building. Totally different thing in a few minutes. Here's some other details. The dining area and a little repetition of the living room scene looking out, a little dark slide. I'm sorry these are a little dark, but there you see the piano relationship to the living area. The right hand is the core element. That's also a teak wall. Since I've added the studio on the roof, that drawing area in the left of the right-hand slide is no longer there. That's kind of a reception area. Some details of the courtyard. That raked gravel is kind of nice. The only trouble with it is seedlings do get in it, and you have to kind of weed them out occasionally. The slide on the left is the storage, 4 by 16 foot storage area with louvered doors. Now another house is also in Champaign that I designed, which some very close friends. As I said, I think the best things you ever do are for the finest clients. And I couldn't have had better clients than they are. They're very close friends, and maybe I'm prejudiced. But this is the Wurstler house, and they like the more simple and smaller palette. It's a teak floor again, but this view looking out to the courtyard is, you see the butted glass. That's 36 feet of glass facing that courtyard. And I was kind of into a pyramid thing, the fireplace and the fountains in the courtyard, and so on, carry that design theme throughout. Here, another view of the furniture grouping and of the fireplace. Kitchen in one of the bedrooms. The kitchen detail of the light I thought came out rather well. It's a teak strip with a glass shelf on top of it, back to the wall, and a light under that, and you get kind of a nice reflection through glass, through whatever you put on that glass shelf. Now to a few other buildings. This is Bloomington High School. I won't really pay so much attention to the details now, because tonight I have some others that I think will bring out a little more of this theme. Than it's just to show you a range of architectural effort. Dave Hermanson worked in the office that I collaborated with on this project, and we did this. This is about 22 years ago. The gymnasium, Bloomington High School. And I've been conscious in several other projects of trying to find out what is our present day inheritance from the Prairie School or the Chicago School, what's part of our region. And not to be imitative of Frank Lloyd Wright or of Sullivan or any of those, but try to understand what principles are involved. And certainly there's nothing unusual about a big overhanging roof. In our prairie climate, this is very often a good thing to have. The library of Concordia College in Springfield on the left-hand side, and Babyfold in Normal, Illinois, which is an orphanage, were instances of that. Maybe it is expressed here in the appellate court at Elgin on the left, and the City Hall in Bloomington, Illinois, in a different way. I'm going to go into more detail on the appellate court tonight as an example of the urban stage and the use of analogy and metaphor in design. So we'll see more of that later, but I just give it a little bit to you now. The College of Education at the University of Illinois is maybe an extension of that idea of an overhanging floor. It was kind of a cliche at the time, maybe still is, to do buildings with big tops, you know, that stretch out over everything. Yet I got the program from the College of Education, and it was odd because they had thought of it as a 4-story building, as other university buildings typically are at Illinois. You see the architecture building at the far background, our Georgian palazzo. And I feel that American campuses tend to imitate or be influenced by the Renaissance, post-Renaissance, in which every department has to have its palazzo. That is, to have its 4 or 5-story building, freestanding proudly. This is physics, this is chemistry, and so on. Well, the programmers for the College of Education, they did an excellent job, I thought, but they worked with that kind of that supposition there'd be 4 floors or 5 floors. And they got to what they call the staff center, that is the faculty offices, seminar rooms, was almost twice as big. And they said, well, let's take 2 floors. And I studied a while, and I said, well, why do we have to do a 4-story building? Maybe we could do a more pavilion-like building and say, okay, that staff center floor is simply a larger floor. And we'll do it as a roof overhang, the whole floor. So it's a 16-foot cantilever over everything else. See the end view of it, gives you some idea of it. It's a symmetrical plan. I have to confess the boat design thing came into this. It's something like a ship. Down the center is a long core, like the uptakes in a ship, the boiler rooms coming up and the engine spaces, mechanical spaces up to the stacks and so on. And we did the stairs in there. That allowed perimeter, outside perimeter, to be entirely human occupancy. We didn't use any of the perimeter for any service spaces. I spoke a little while ago of thinking of the acoustics or other senses besides visual as a source of design. In doing the stairs for the inside of this core, I don't have a slide of them here, but there's a definite change, deliberately. You come from the corridors and classroom areas around the perimeter of this core, which goes down the center. You see the top of it in the right-hand slide coming through. That's the extension of the long core. And at each end of that, there's a stairwell and elevators. Well, you come from the corridors and classrooms on each side and the offices, and it's suddenly a bright acoustical space. We deliberately kept all absorbing material out of that stairwell. The stair treads are separated, you know, and you see light coming through and light from above, and it's a lighter palette of colors. And the acoustic quality is bright. I've been interested in the reaction of students and everybody coming in there to see what difference there is in the way they suddenly can open up and they tap their feet or they start singing or something. There's definitely a release from that change of pace from the more acoustically dead spaces of corridors and classrooms. That was just one example I wanted to tell you about. Now we come to some boats, which may be relevant or not. I don't know. It's just, as I say, a hobby. But in the left-hand slide, the courtyard of my house with a high-speed boat that I built, which didn't work too well. It's since been sent to the graveyard. It became, by the time I got its performance characteristics corrected, it got to be too heavy and wasn't as fast. So the next year I built Kymos, which is in the gallery, the Krannert Art Museum, in that slide, with some other work. We had an exhibit. And that one is a real performer. It still performs very well. Here it is, more slides of it. It's a deep V for an outboard anyway, fairly deep V, so it rides well in rough water. It does about 60 miles an hour with the Merck 150 horse engine. It's entirely open, as you can see. But I kind of like that. I mean, why have a windshield? You enjoy that. If you enjoy, say, a motorbike or something going 45, 50 miles an hour, why not? You're not going out when it's bad weather. I mean, you're insane if you do. And so enjoy that openness, and it really is something. Well, that's mahogany strips on marine plywood, and the bottom is fiberglass. This one I built about 4 or 5 years ago out of plywood. It's kind of a cruiser. I've since sold it to Alan Johnson, a former student who is a champion 470 sailor. He wanted a boat for a kind of a tender. So he has it on Carlisle Lake in Illinois now. Then I built a small sailboat using plywood and fiberglass, named Découverte II, which is my great-great-great-grandfather was a captain in the British Navy and had a naval vessel and fought in the War of 1812 against us. And the name of his boat was Découverte. It was captured from the French in 1805, and so I presumed to say, well, okay. It means, in French, it means keep a sharp lookout. Découverte, you know, is cover. Découverte is uncover, or unpeel your eye. Keep your eyes peeled, open. And I think you really need to do that when you're sailing, so I thought it was appropriate. But that underwent a change, and here you see the change taking place. Because in building a bigger boat, Osimo, which you'll see in a minute, motor sailor, I needed a dinghy. And rather than buy one or build another one, I thought, well, I just would convert this. So we cut off the bow and stern and made it symmetrical, and burned up the remnants. So that's all great vessels usually come to their end in fire or sinking. I hate to say that, but so this was what happened here. And here you see what we made out of that. It's Osimo is the name of the new boat, which means in Ojibwe Indian, which is our Indian nation up around Lake Superior, it means breakaway, it means escape. And I thought it would be a good name because it's short and easy to paint. So the name on the dinghy is in big letters, black letters on white. Now you see on the boat itself, it's just the reverse, small letters in white on a black hull. Now that's ridiculous, but I thought it might amuse you. Here's some naval architecture. The larger craft, a steel hull. It's been changed considerably, but it's still pretty much this in scheme. It's built from a standard trawler hull with some modifications, steel frame and deck, and then it has a lot of teak inside and on the deck. It has an engine. It's very much like the house in a way, and has an engine, as you'll see in a minute, engine room in the center, a little forward of the center, in a core. Then everything else is around it. A great cabin in the stern, a forward cabin, and then galley on one side and navigation on the other. The cockpit on the deck is right above the engine room. I think it'll show a lot better than Here's the hull under construction. Those cross pieces on the right are temporary. They came out, they were just for bracing during the building process. The framing, I wanted to keep